walking the serpentine path, following the footsteps of the ancestors, walking the serpentine path, making our way back home. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho. Following the serpentine path. Life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed, and I'm a plant walker, song keeper, word weaver, artesana, visual and performance artist, womb wisdom keeper, and your guide on this serpentine path of life. Together, we'll dive deep into all things related to plant medicine, ancestral reconnection, intergenerational healing, womb sovereignty and bodily autonomy, rites of passage and initiation, time travel, shape-shifting, dimension hopping, the reclamation of our collective earth-based practices, and the ongoing, never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Welcome to the serpentine path where the ancestors have called us back to. Let's start at the end and find our way back home together. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Wadiasid. I'm your host, and today it is a wonderful privilege to be able to welcome one of my teachers onto the show, Luka Barba of Deeply Rooted Healing Traditions. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Awesome. Well, we will start with the question that I ask all of my guests, which is if your ancestors were here with us now, which of course they always are, how would they introduce you and what role would they say that you play in your family lineage?
It's interesting because I started to read this and or started to like really sit with this. And then I was like, no, I'm gonna just really kind of pull back and really feel into this. And I feel an immense pride and it's like a beauty in the sense of what they see and felt that I could do and it actualizing. And in a sense, for me, it feels very much like a coming home. And I feel it's so, so far back of just the honoring of families and the honoring of life. And so for knowing in my bones that that is what I usher and that is what I protect. I feel like that is what they would want to really shine the light on.
So aligned with, being your student and the way you speak and the way you teach and the way you walk your path. It's been an immense privilege to learn from you and to hear not only your wisdom that you've cultivated over the years of deep, deep self study, and then also deep study, apprenticing in the homes of families and apprenticing at the feet of birthing and postpartum women and apprenticing to the babies as well. Like you're such a little baby whisperer. And yeah, I got connected to you through the innate postpartum certification training that I'm doing with Rochelle Saliga, who was on the show a couple months back. And you didn't teach until this current module that we're on right now, which is all about breast health and the heart space and the nourishing of our babies and our children and the life and the generations that are coming forth. And so Rochelle would drop in like, oh, and Luka's going to get so deep into this. Oh, and Luka talks about this in an amazing way. And Luka. And I was like, I want to meet her so bad. And then I got to sit in class with you and receive your medicine. And I was like, oh my God, like so beautiful. And you're very aligned with Rochelle's orientation towards thriving life. Like that is what the whole purpose of the innate training is, like getting back into centering maternal health and centering mothers. And so you're aligned with that orientation. Then you also have your own that's based on all of your lived experience of supporting women and families. And yeah, just all the stories that you share about the babies and how you work with them and like how they called you in your path. Like you went from not really thinking that you were going to be focusing on babies and families at all into that being like a huge part of your work, specifically with like a lot of the craniosacral work that you do. So yeah, that feels accurate. And just the protection of family. Like we pulled a card right before getting on this recording, and it was the wolf card. And the wolf card, the first thing was like guardian of the family. And I feel that that really is like your medicine that you walk with is the protection of intact family culture. So yeah, I feel that. Awesome. Well, I would love to give you some space to just speak on your path, your work, your orientation, anything that you want to share with people.
Thank you. Yeah, so a shorter version because it is spanning from so many years of my life of getting to this point, of course, but into my own calling, I would say. That I was for the first portion of my life, for like 15 years, I was not at all in this. I was in the fashion industry and I was very masculine driven. Um, and as I started coming onto my 15th year, I started to get a huge voice come in and saying that I was done. And that was a little scary for me because I felt like that I liked what I did and I did it well. So I went on to this 3-year journey of like really trying to find myself and actually spending that time with my youngest. She was 2 at the time. And so I then got another clear download that I was to be doing craniosacral therapy, biodynamic craniosacral therapy. At that time, I had no idea what that was at all. And it was again serendipitous of how it came even into my field. And so I happened to look it up, and there was a training that was starting a few months from me, and it was an hour away. And it was the first thing that I said, the first thing that was actually really challenging for me in my motherhood with young kids to say yes to, because it meant that it was a 3-year training. And every 8 to 9 weeks that I would be gone from my family for 5 days. So this was a huge commitment. And I was a mom who was 100% with my kids. I worked from home. Like I was that kind of mom. So, but again, this calling was so strong. It was undeniable. Um, and so, yeah, I signed up for it. And within the same month of signing up for that, that is how my best friend told me in regards to Rochelle's work. It was the first time she had ever spoke, and it was, I think, at a conference. and my best friend was there. And then we looked, and Rochelle was going to be in LA in like a couple weeks. So everything was like lining up, right? And when I was at that training, I really remembered thinking if I was gonna like connect the two. I didn't even know, right? As you were saying, what in my mind, I was just gonna work on adults. Like that's it. I was just gonna work on adults and do craniosacral. And I remember thinking, I don't think that this is gonna come together. But I'm just following wherever I'm being led. And a lot of the teachings of Rochelle and Innate really was this, it was a healing of my heart and of my body, of the postpartum that I had a really hard time with. So with my first, but exceptionally so with my second, as I had a home birth, but I got injured in the process and I became paralyzed. Um, and in that, I had no care. I had no care. Like my midwife did not let me know what was going on. She did not let me know resources. I really had to figure this out on my own with two children, and I was barely walking. Okay. And so this path that I started to just being that I was leading from and being called through my heart was so much of a path that was healing myself in the process. And so I started going and coming across, I read somewhere in regards to breastfeeding, how breastfeeding issues can really be helped with craniosacral therapy. And I just thought, oh, it's like not even a second thought on that. Like I was going to sign up for that. So I became certified in lactation. And that's actually where I started, was lactation. And while I was in my training. And so I started really just seeing everything and being with families and teaching about lactation. And I really just noticed after some time that how limiting that was for me, right? Just seeing out of the lactation model, right? Especially you see, even if like anything medicalized, right? It's like an umbrella, and this is the protocol, or these are the things they teach on, and then it's like that's it. And I really started to see that in my practice. It was like, there was just only so much that you could do with those protocols of volume and positioning and latch. So then I went into, and then I would start to see, wow, these babies actually need body work, right? Whenever I would come across a baby that those weren't the answers. So then once I was able to do body work, that was a game changer, because now I've brought in another lens, right? And now this is also held with kind of the innate teachings, right? So then it was like, oh wow. And while I was in my craniosacral training, an assistant teacher that became my mentor, who really took me under her wing, she was a midwife. And she was also part of mentoring at APA, which is an Association for Pre and Perinatal Birth Psychology and Health. And she said, you need to look into this. And I was like, okay. And so that really got me on to now this whole aspect of pre and perinatal psychology and the true understanding that we are sentient beings. The babies come in, they're sentient beings, that we are collecting all this information from conception in utero into the birth process and postpartum, and that lives within our body. And that is the lens that we see out of, right? And that just blew my mind because, again, when I was pregnant with my first almost 20 years ago, I had actually stumbled upon this in a documentary. And I share about this in class where, this little boy, he's like 3 or 4, and the documentary is called What Babies Want. And this little boy was in playing with like Legos or, blocks and stuff. And he had fully recreated the hospital room that he was born into, and like had even like his little bassinet thing like next to the bed, the formation of like where the bed was, like all of the things, right? And that just really, like, I took that in and I definitely stored it within myself of like, is that even possible? Right? Like, that's crazy if so. So fast forward, I'm in this and I really delve in deep. And I notice that it's a lot to take in, right? Like really think about that, really think about that we've kind of missed it, right? In the sense of like, yes, we all know, okay, that we're holding trauma from within our childhood, okay? And that's so much about what we feel in our adults, right? But like we're missing more the foundational pieces where I personally believe that those are more compoundments and can be compoundments of an original imprint. Um, and that it's deeper in the sense of like our nervous system is being set to these very first memories, right? And so when I was sitting with this, I was like, wow, this is huge. This is significant, right? And I remember saying out loud, like, I will not be bringing this in my practice. Like, this is not what I don't like. In a way, it was me being like, I don't want to take that on. I don't want to hold that. I don't want to, it's so big. And after some time, when I was working with the babies, they started to talk to me and they started to show me. And I started to see what they were trying to tell me about. And it was a lot about how they were born and them wanting to process a certain point of time, whether it be in utero or whether it be conception or whether it be in the birth process. And then that is what I was starting to see as like issues at the breast or issues with sleep. Okay. And then like at the changing table, car seat, because those are all the places that they get almost like triggered. The implicit body memory gets turned on because of there's a same frequency that's happening there. Okay. So yeah, so then I couldn't deny it. I started to see it, and then that was the next lens that I was bringing in. And that I felt like, wow, now I can, and I do also traditional work with the mother. So traditional postpartum work with the mother. So I really didn't create, like I didn't mindfully create this, right? Again, I was so led to just wherever I was led to through my heart. And then I turned around after like 5 years and really noticed, wow, I have created a full spectrum postpartum care that could penetrate out to the families, right? And continuation on.
I can't count the number of women who have told me that they want to transition off of birth control, but they don't know where to start. They're scared, they're vulnerable, and they don't know where to get accurate evidence-based information. I feel these women's pain because I too was once in their shoes. I transitioned off of hormonal birth control at age 20 after being on the pill for 4.5 years. I didn't do any preparation, I didn't do any research, I just quit the pills cold turkey and got a copper IUD inserted a few months later. What happened over the next 6 years of my life was a complete and total shit show. I struggled with acne that was so bad that I ended up on spironolactone, doxycycline, Accutane, and every single topical that you could think of. My weight went through super intense fluctuations that made zero sense. My cramps were so painful that I couldn't get out of bed for the first few days of my cycle. I was bleeding through my clothes. My emotions were all over the place. I had constant headaches, a totally erratic sleep schedule, chronic vaginal infections, and lots of embarrassing bloating. Worst of all, I was entirely disconnected from the seat of my creative power, my womb. Now the thing is, all of this pain, confusion, and disembodiment could have been easily avoided had I known then what I know now about female hormonal health and sacred womb reverence. Now, after years of healing my own relationship with my cycle, my fertility, and my sovereign right to prevent pregnancy without the use of hormonal contraceptives and IUDs, I have a lot of hard earned wisdom to share with you all. The truth is that I didn't have a doctor to educate me on the medical side of this massive transition, and I didn't have a wise woman to midwife me through the spiritual side of this massive transition. But I figured out how to reclaim this biological and spiritual education for myself, and now I can offer it to other sisters who are seeking guidance and support. This journey of deep self-healing and womb liberation is what inspired my upcoming online group class, the Natural Birth Control Series. Together, we will dive into the physiologic brilliance of female fertility by interweaving the clinical facts and the mystical wisdom that all of our great-great-great-grandmothers once walked with. We will be reclaiming our womb sovereignty together in ceremony, in community, in the way that women have been doing since the beginning of time. Classes will be held on Zoom from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the first 3 Sundays of October, with class recordings available for anyone who is unable to attend live. Our first class on October 5th will be focused on how to transition off of hormonal birth control and IUDs. Our second class on October 12th will be focused on intuiting our body's biological fertility signals. And our third class on October 19th will be focused on plants for pregnancy prevention and conscious contraception. The Natural Birth Control Series is open to women of all ages and life phases, including women in their fertile childbearing years, along with mothers, grandmothers, and aunties who want to help educate and support the young women in their lives. The Natural Birth Control Series is being offered for $33, which gives you access to all 3 classes and recordings, along with my extensive resource guide to support you on your womb sovereignty journey. To learn more about the program, you can visit the link in the show notes. Looking forward to seeing you in class.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for all of that overview. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking about how, like, our future selves know how to time travel back and just give us these little breadcrumbs of exactly what our path is going to unfold as, both in like the most beautiful things of like the teachers that show up in the trainings and the like documentaries and the weird articles we read that like resurface, but then also the really intense initiations that we go through, like you talking about your postpartum period and being literally paralyzed and being totally isolated and abandoned by the support system that you are meant to have when you come into that insane initiation of a birth and a motherhood journey, whether it's with your first child, your second, your fifth, whatever. And, I was just thinking about what you were speaking to of when the birth imprints first came up, and you were like, I'm not touching that in my practice because it is so triggering. And I can speak from my own experience, when I first learned about birth imprints a couple years ago, it was when I was living in the Colombian jungle. For people who are new to the podcast, a big part of my journey was that I lived in an indigenous village in the Colombian jungle for a whole year and a half with my late elders, Abuelo Keruin and Abuela Maria, in Kofan territory. And while I was there, I was taking this class with Rochelle, her physiologic baby care course, and she spoke to birth imprints. And I was like, what is all of this? And I went down a whole rabbit hole in my own world of like just furiously researching, but then also realizing that years before, when I was kind of in my early 20s, I had started to kind of unravel this stuff just in meditation, of seeing things from my baby self of what the hospital looked like and what the energy felt like in the room and what the relationship was between my parents and the doctors and everything that was going on. And at that time, I think I was 22 and I totally couldn't hold it. I was like, fuck that. Like, that is so scary. I'm not touching that. There's rage, there's fear, there's like so much coming up. Like, I can't go there. And then, fast forward, I guess I was 26 or 27 at this point. I'm learning more about birth imprints. I'm living in this jungle. And I'm also in ceremony with my elders 3 to 5 times a week, every week, drinking like hundreds of cups of ayahuasca, going through my whole lineage story, clearing so much pain and trauma and violence, recalling so much ancestral blessings and care and love and support.
And then birth imprints came up. And when I tell you my ceremonial medicine work was ripped open, like it was like so intense, just ceremony after ceremony after ceremony of seeing things of my conception, seeing things of the time in my mother's womb, seeing things about the relationship that my parents' dynamic had at the moment, seeing external pressures from family members, from society, from culture, from like all of it in the little waters of my mom's womb, seeing what happened in the birth, seeing what happened in the postpartum, and the grief that came up, and the anger, and the rage, and the pain, and the being like, oh, all of this stuff that I thought happened to me in my 20s had nothing to do with that. It had to do with this. Like, as you spoke to, of like, it's the compounding of everything that is being imprinted upon us in birth. So, yeah, there's always more to dive into with it. But I'd love to, just give people an overview of what is a birth imprint, that word itself, like birth imprint, because we're going to throw it around a lot in the conversation.
Yeah, so again, it is, well, A, just first having an understanding that we're sentient beings, that we come in with consciousness, okay? And so an imprint could be, and I don't like to use the term positive or negative, but in this context, it will be in the sense of like an imprint that is more of like a fracture, okay? Something that was like a hard kind of non-optimal experience, okay? So how I was taught in regards to the blueprint, right? So the blueprint is kind of like it's a universal template. It's kind of like it's in regards to nature's law, right? It doesn't take on any judgments, right? It's purely its own kind of guides of information. And it's kind of our wholeness, our whole being self. And so what happens is, so we come in with that light, right? And we do come in with a light, right? The zinc spark. And that shows like how much we are pure energy. And then what happens in that process, right, is that these imprints will come in. So we'll start with conception. So an imprint in conception, okay, could be where, just think about it. Um, were you like really, really wanted? Were you, was it a surprise, and did it induce shame in your mother? Was it shortly after a miscarriage, right? Was there, yeah, I mean, you can go in so many places, right, with conception. So that will be a first kind of like imprint. How was it when your spark came in, right? So there's the blueprint. That's all undenying, right? And that's our true orientation of self. And then there's an imprint that comes in. So now we go into in utero and think about, again, what could arise in utero? So was it that your mother was really stressed out, right? Was it that your mother actually drank when you were in utero? Was there abuse? Was there a death in the family? Was there, yeah, was there possibilities, something came forth in an ultrasound and now there's a possibility that something's going on with you. And so now you have to be monitored every week, right? I mean, it can go on and on and on. Then we go to labor and then delivery. Okay. And again, so much there, right? Especially these days. So you can go into, first of all, it's really important to have the understanding, like, did you initiate labor, right? Or was there an induction? Okay, because that's really important question of an understanding. And we'll go more into why that is. Um, and then think about the actual birth process. Were you assisted out? Meaning that could even be a shoulder dystocia, right? You have to be pulled out, right? C-section, that's an assisted birth. Forceps, vacuum. Um, were you, born with a cord around your neck? Were you born breech? So again, all of these experiences are going to be set into some form within our psyche. There's going to be a story that we have to tell ourselves when we're experiencing these, right? In order to make it. So, what are those stories that we had created? What are those lived experiences that are in the body? Because again, we are implicit off just complete implicit memory until 18 months. So we're taking everything, we're recording everything through our body. And so that's why as adults, we're not going to remember these things unless, right, we go into journeys, we can go into ceremony. I had mine on the table at craniosacral therapy. But yes, we can elicit that for sure. But what is more so is that when we are, and that's why you see it everywhere. Now I'm going to give you a lens and you're going to be out and you're going to go, oh my gosh, everybody is responding to these foundational imprints and it's unconscious.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like it's a good overview of that whole thing of how is your spark of life coming in, what you spoke to, were you wanted, was there shame, was there guilt, was there any kind of coercion, did you come after a miscarriage or maybe an abortion, some kind of pregnancy loss, that whole time that you spend in your mother's womb. I mean, I just think about mothers in our modern world and the amount of stress that they are under from like every single layer that is being thrown at them. And then when we're moving into that birth portal, a big thing that has been coming up for me recently, because I was an induction baby. My mom was induced. She went in at, I think, 39 weeks. And the doctors were like, she's failing to thrive. We have to get her out right now. And so she was induced. She had an epidural. And I've gone through a lot around induction and feeling like my choice was taken from me. And I actually just did a family constellation session yesterday all around choice. Like as an adult, as a 29-year-old woman, why does it feel like my relationship to choosing life is like being stunted, being blocked? And there's a lot of ancestral stuff that I went into with that, but I also know that a big birth imprint is that I didn't choose my birth. And in a way, my soul did choose my birth. My soul chose to come into this world during this period of time in a hospital birth setting, in the family that I have that's very medicalized. Like, yes, there is a soul imprinting that was like, everything's perfect. But then also there is this stunting of being like, well, I was still chilling in my mom's womb. I was still vibing. And I've felt that that pattern has really played itself out in my life, that there have been countless times where I've been like, I'm good here. Things are feeling comfortable. I'm happy. Like everything is sorted. And it feels like life is just like, bitch slap, no, like on to the next thing. And I have this big wound of like, but I didn't choose it. And it takes me a long time to be like, no, 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 everything's okay. Like the transition is occurring perfectly. God is orchestrating everything. But my imprinting of that is like big victim. Like I'm getting this taken from me. And like, where is my choice in this? And not feeling empowered to take that step. And also feeling alone with the epidural, because with the epidural, it completely shuts down the connection that the mother has to her body. She can't feel baby, like moving this way, moving that way. She can't feel the contraction. She doesn't actually really know what's going on. And so then also having these wounds with my mom of feeling abandoned and feeling like, well, my mom wasn't even there with me in the birth because, like, on a psycho-spiritual level, we were like severed as well. And so then it's been a deep process of being like, how do I reconnect with my mother and like just be able to hug her and like know that she's there for me and she loves me so much. And that's obvious in everything she's done for me. And yet my little baby fetus brain is like, my mom abandoned me. And so when you say, like, you walk into the world with this knowledge and you just see it like everywhere, like literally everywhere. Like, I just hold so much compassion for people now because I'm like, oh, that was from your birth. And also, there's ways that we can work through this, like we as adult selves get to take ownership over our experience and transform it and alchemize it.
I would love to give another layer to what arose for you. Like that is so amazing. I love hearing how much you've delved into this and really feeling and being so aware of what is arising in your little baby self and what has, like continued on through that lens. And so, yeah, and when you're saying it, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so you spoke so much to this energy, right? Of like you were chilling, you were good, and then all of a sudden life kind of like bitch slaps you and moves you into another direction, right? And if you feel into that, that is so much your birth, right? That is so much at that moment in time, right? Exactly like the words that you chose to use, right? The energy that you have conveying that, okay? Even how you moved your hands, that is so much of your imprint right there, being like, exactly, that is like completely still so much within you. Okay. And we tend to recapitulate that in our life until we can integrate it. And so it's really important to have an understanding in regards to if you um if you moved into labor your own self, right? What a gift that is, right? So you have, and you've heard me say this, like that is the point in time where our most clearest form of intuition really sparks off, right? That's like nobody else knows when I'm going to be born. Like that is my knowing deep within me, right? And so if somebody removes that, that's where that self-doubt can come in. That's where that grief can come in. That's where that even like, yeah, as you said, like feeling a victim, feeling like constantly things are being taken from you, right? Having maybe a point of insecurity of like your decisions, right? Of like, am I on the right path? Am I right? Timing is going to be another thing for you, right? So timing was completely removed. So when I say timing is going to be something, it could be something where you're a person that like always has to be on time, or you're a person with like no matter what you do, you're always late, or you have to be there 15 minutes early, right? Like what is your relationship with time? Another insight is like when you're saying then you felt abandoned by your mother, right? With the epidural coming in. And that's very much so because that is also our first actual teamwork. That is our first, not only being like, oh my God, I'm going to share when it's my time, right? Then you're like, okay, and I'm going to be heard and I'm going to be seen and I'm going to be reflected on, right? And then we're going to have teamwork in that. You can see the beauty of physiological birth, right? Of like how these are just more than just phases, right? And it's more of like really imprinting our nervous system. It's imprinting how the world receives us or doesn't receive us, right? It's so much of our, yeah, it's like a soundboard. And it's like we go through all of these specific um, layers to really, yeah, find who we are and how can we relate. And so, yeah, and so that is with that being the first teamwork, and that now that's blurred from the drugs, right? Because say there wasn't any drugs, there's this beautiful harmony of hormones that the baby lets off, right? And then then the mom responds, and the mom drops some hormones, and there's this dance, like the symbiotic dance, right? So imagine, like, feel that, like, oh, that is invigorating. Where it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, you can see when you come out, and if that continues, you want to be part of the collective. You can really feel your way and be with the community, right? And you want to be an active participation of the community, participant of the community, right? So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like it just lands me in the experience of like that is what happened. And yeah, it's something that I'm thinking about a lot because I'm in my Saturn return right now. I just turned 29, I guess 2 months ago at this point. And it's been a really intense moment of being like, what kind of an adult am I choosing to rebirth myself into? And I've noticed that pattern of like feeling like I'm forced into a new beginning. I'm forced into a transition. I'm forced into a transformation. It's out of my control. And what has been the beautiful part of this whole past year since essentially being forced to leave the jungle where I had been living and coming back home, kind of being universally forced to live with my parents again after a decade out of the house and like having no money and having to do all of these things that I'm like, what the fuck is this, you know? Recognizing that what you were speaking to, the transition in time, like actually giving myself time to integrate everything that has happened to me for the past 29 years of my life, essentially, back in my parents' home. And to see I'm in this very big transition in terms of my life purpose, my life path. I'm stepping into birth work. I'm stepping into really being of service to women. And it's been a long time coming. And being able to take ownership of that and say, I'm going to go slow for the first time in my life, I'm going to go slow. I've never ever done that with anything ever once. I am like an all in kind of bitch. Like, I'm like, let's go. And I am still like, let's go. I mean, I'm deeply immersed in all of my education, all of my studies. Like, I'm that kind of a person. But giving myself the space to be like, I'm going to choose when I'm going to take the next step, that feels like a huge reorientation of my birth story. And it also feels like a huge healing of what was an immense boundary violation. Like, I think that's the biggest thing that I can paint that as, that being forced into induction of a boundary violation of my own divine timing, my intuition that we spoke to. And I feel like that's a good segue that we can move into. We just spoke to the boundary violations of induction, of epidurals, of, having to be pulled out, assisted, C-section birth. And then there's other boundary violations that occur both like during the birthing time, during pregnancy as well, even before pregnancy. Like if you're a woman like myself who carries any kind of cervical trauma from IUD insertions, and that's like the imprinting that you have in relationship to your cervix, if you've had cervical biopsies, and that's your relationship, and you maybe have scar tissue there that is like stalling the birth because you can't dilate because you have deep unaddressed trauma there. And then there's the other portal of in the immediate postpartum phase, the boundary violations that occur very often around being immediately ripped from your mother, or baby boys who are circumcised within a day or two or potentially hours after being born, receiving vaccines immediately upon birth and being stuck with needles. Like, all of those things are big boundary violations. And then the imprint that that holds on the mother and on the baby and on the father who's in the birth field as well. I feel that's there's a lot of things there, but whatever you want to weave in around the topic of boundary violations.
Yeah. What I was feeling that really is like being called to be shared is one of the things that I really see is, mothers who do all the things, right? To have a home birth or just have a natural birth, and right, they just do all the things, and then all of a sudden they have to either get transferred or something goes on and they have a C-section. So not all the time, but there is definitely quite a few in my own practice that I've really come to see that my first question after I see them is, how were they born? And a lot of times those mothers were born via C-section. So there's that missing thing in our culture. We don't think to go that far. We don't think to go like, so I may have been asking, like, how was your mother born? Right? Your mother, how was she born? Right? And if you hear this long lineage of C-section, right? This is now more of a like the body has no idea, it didn't embody birth. So I feel like that's really important because that could be something that midwives are asking. And that could be something that we can completely work on, right? Is really helping the body transform and helping the body integrate what it was missing and give it what it needed, right? And so much can happen in that. But I just want to share that because there's those mothers and then they're left to being like not knowing what happened, right? Like, I don't get it. Like, I did all the things, right? I got the right midwife, I got the right doula, right? We did a water birth. My husband was on board. I said my mantras. I visualized, right? And what we're missing is the body. Okay, like that is the most important thing when it comes to birth, right? Is how does the body feel? Does it feel safe? And if it's still in this place of shock from when it originally, the first imprint, as I share, right? It's still there. It's still waiting for somebody to see them at that moment in time and still hold that little baby of like how hard that was, right? And how scary that must have been, and how confusing and how jarring. So I feel like that's really important to share. Kind of like bouncing around. So then I know you said in regards to births that need assistance. It's really important to also see within this could also be what arises from that, is that there is a mentality of that they tend to always need to be rescued. Okay, so there's going to be kind of a rescue, like a damsel in distress kind of thing, right? When things get really intense, it's kind of either a shutdown and I need to get rescued, or it can turn into, like again, just self-doubt, always needing somebody there, okay? And then into victimhood. So victimhood can be a really easy place to slip into for somebody that had an assisted birth. So yeah, I feel that is, and then as you said, regarding afterbirth, right? So if there is the baby taken to do vitals, the baby was taken into the nursery, the baby was taken to the NICU, right? What I see over and over and over again is that they go into these spaces, let's just say NICU, okay? And then baby comes out, family goes home, and it's almost like they get swept into, right, like the chaos of our culture in the sense of like what it is to give birth these days and postpartum, right? Where when I say that, it's like, okay, now okay, we got to make sure breastfeeding is happening. Okay. And then we need to make sure this. And like, if you've got other children, then it's like, so under resourced, right? And so like you're being swept away. Like there's a place almost that I see in families like this where it's like, that is the only thing that they can do is they get home and then they hit the pavement running, right? It's like, oh my God, and then we have to do this and we have to do that and all the things, all the things. And because of lack of support, right? But also our culture does not at all, okay, support or even implement pause. Like come home, take a breather. What just happened? Right? Like you hear cultures that take weeks to grieve, maybe even longer. Okay. And something like this happens and we don't even give a second. And so that's where so much, if you're a practitioner really coming into that space to hit the pause button, you've heard me say that so many times, right? And it's like, it's like that could be such our gift in that moment because it's the last thing that's on their minds. And so if we could hit the pause button to just let things catch up and that we can just feel again is significant. And I feel like that is what the babies are trying to show us every time when they're at the breast and they're pushing away and they're arching their back and they're crying, right? Or they're not able to fall asleep or stay asleep. Those are the places that they're going to show like, hey, can we go back to like what just happened? Can we like, how come nobody is talking about this? Right. And so they just keep showing it because babies are so wise. They know they didn't come here, within minutes to be heavy down with imprints. They are like still with our ancestors of like, no, 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 we need to sing, we need to dance, we need to, we need to tell stories. And babies do, they love to tell their story. And so it is that they are so wise, but we have lost our way to hear them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what you were speaking to about in the beginning of how you'll see women who do everything that they possibly can to have their dream birth. They're doing all the hypnobirthing, they're doing all their mantras, they're doing all their visualizations, their partners on board, they have everything prepared. They have the most amazing midwife. Like they're so supported. They did their work. And then they end up oftentimes getting transferred, having a C-section, which is not what most women want to do. I would say the majority of women. And then you ask them, well, how was your birth? And then you find out they were a C-section. And then you ask about the grandmother and you find out maybe there was a C-section. And I remember when I was living in the jungle and I was talking about, what would motherhood look like for me? And there was an elder there who was amazing. She said to me, she was like, before you think anything about your own children, your own potential walk as a mother, you have to return to your birth. You have to return to your birth. Like go into ceremony with your cup of medicine and pray over it and say, like, I want to see my birth story. And then after that, she told me to do that. And after that, it unraveled this whole motherline mapping that occurred where I was like, okay, I know what my birth is. And I asked my mom more questions. And then learning, my mother was a forceps birth that was very traumatic for my grandma, very, very traumatic. And then asking about my grandmother's birth. My great grandma, when she gave birth to my grandma, was the twilight sleep era. So she was fully drugged, knocked out, right? And then my grandma was ripped out of her with forceps. And then she was told she wasn't allowed to breastfeed. They never got that kind of bonding, they never got that repair. My great grandmother never got her actual initiation into motherhood because she was literally drugged. She didn't get to go through the altered state of consciousness. She didn't get to travel out into the cosmos, collect the soul of her child, bring it forth through her body. She didn't get the whole hormonal matrix that comes through that creates that bonding with mother-daughter. And so they had a very fractured relationship their whole life, that my mother then healed after her trauma, or sorry, my grandmother then healed after her traumatic birth with my mother, because she did breastfeed. She was like, I am going to be full-time breastfeeding with my baby. And they did get that repair. But then I also think about my great grandma's birth, where it was a very traumatic, long, painful birth. It was a home birth, and my, I guess, great great grandma almost died. And so when my great grandma was born, they said, throw the baby in the corner, save the mother. And my great grandma knew that that had been said about her because it had been told to her, but she had that embodied experience. And so then what is her pregnancy going to be like? What is her relationship with her daughter? Then, my grandma with my mom, me with my mom, and all of that stuff, all that story, like, I'm so grateful that I've had years of going through that before walking into a motherhood portal, because I think about how many women don't even know their own birth story. They don't know. Or like I've asked my dad so many times, like, tell me about any of the births of you and your siblings. And he's like, I have no idea. And I'm like, how do you not know? Like, but of course you don't know. Of course you don't know. And then as you were speaking to all the ways in which babies want to tell their stories, I remember in class you were speaking so much to the breast crawl, which is like a baby's first rite of passage. It's their first choice that they get to take. Like they're sitting on your lap and their little eyes can see the line going up your belly, and they can see the darkness of your nipples, and they're like figuring it out, and they're telling the story of their birth. And you were speaking to how a lot of the time in that early postpartum period, when you see these babies who are doing what you said, like they're pushing back, they don't want to nurse, they're crying uncontrollably, all their needs are met. You're like, you've eaten, you've slept, you've pooped, you're warm, like you're fine, like what's going on? And it's that needs release cry that they just have to like get it out. And a lot of the times they have to tell their story. And so you speaking to like giving babies back that rite of passage, being able to do the breast crawl and show maybe where they got stuck, and show where they're trying to wiggle out, and show what happened to them, because it's so encoded. Um, yeah, I'm wondering, do you want to, I know it's a very big topic. We probably can't go super deep into it, but is there anything that you want to talk to about circumcision? Because that is something that's huge, and you've spoken about it a lot in class.
Yeah, this one's really hard in the sense of well, being in a country where it is still very much like, I even had a conversation this morning with a client trying to really understand, um, why would somebody want to have their child go through this procedure? Again, it's really hard for me because I think I work with the babies after they've had it, and I can feel, okay, in their body, in their soul, what that's done. And so for me, it's really challenging to be with. Um, yeah, I personally, saying what I just said, what it feels like to me is that, especially if the birth itself was traumatizing and or in the womb, okay? I feel like, and this is again what I'm sensing into the body with so many babies that I've worked with now, that it feels like circumcision is kind of like the seal. Like it really drives anything that happened prior to that really deep down. And there's a disassociation in these boys that is alarming, to be honest. It's only felt with circumcised boys that I have felt, to the level of this disassociation. And then it got me to really see with where we're at with the masculine at this point in time, right? A lot of people, you can hear sometimes people saying like, where's our men? Like they're not at the helm, right? They should be at the helm and they're not at the helm. And like, what is happening, right? And I really feel like this was an attack on our men. I don't think it was by accident. Um, I feel that men are holding this trauma unconsciously, and it's coming out sideways, whether it through, onto their girlfriends or onto their wife. I think it's coming out in the bedroom. Um, yeah, I feel that we're finally getting into a place of really being able to slowly unwrap this, but this is going to be something that's going to be in ancestral trauma, that we have to heal. It's like one of those things that's just going to be still there, even if we end it. That there was, a significant amount of our men that were violated.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that. And it was really interesting. I'm taking some homeopathic remedies right now, a lot having to do with like my own history of a lot of sexual abuse that I've been clearing for years, and I'm in a much better place with it now. But in like the first weeks that I was taking it, I had this insane charge come up around circumcision, like to a level where I was like, the rage that I am feeling right now, like I have to figure out how to do something with this. And it felt unrelated. And then I talked with my homeopath, I guess Friday, and I was giving her my whole story. And then I was like, and I don't know why this came up in this whole rage portal, but like, what the fuck is going on with circumcision? Like, I'm so mad. And she was like, that doesn't surprise me at all because the remedy that you're on, Staphylos aureus, is one specifically for boundary violations, for sexual violations. And it's what homeopaths give to baby boys who have been circumcised and who aren't healing. And so she was like,
Wow.
of course, you're tapping into that, But it is something that I think about a lot as someone who is a sexual abuse survivor. And just when I think about everything that I have been through starting in childhood, and then when I think about all these conversations that we have around rape culture and throwing so much vitriol towards men, which I want to be very clear when I say, as a survivor, sexual violence that is predominantly predicated against women at the hands of men is very real. I've been on the receiving end of it countless times. And also, we're not speaking to the fact that young baby boys, a couple hours or a couple days after their first breath of life, are being sexually violated. And I know that is a strong thing to say, but it is really the truth. And I say it with deep compassion and empathy and understanding for what the brainwashing of parents have gone through predominantly in the United States, but it's also just something where I'm like, in my lived experience as a sexual abuse survivor, absolutely cannot stand by and not speak on this because yeah, like you have all these women saying exactly what you said. Where are the men? Why don't we teach men not to rape? Like blah 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, if we're gonna say, we need to really address rape culture, let's address the fact that these young baby boys are experiencing a form of rape. That is really what it is.
Yeah. The biggest um exalt of boundary, right? I mean, the biggest. And then exactly, I mean, you hit it so much on the head. It's just like where again, let's go back to the beginning. Whenever we find ourselves like in this whole pointing fingers, right? And again, like I have myself in sexual assault and totally say that with much empathy and realness of that. And why is it? Like let's get deep into the inquiry. Why? Right? Um, and so yeah, I feel strongly that this is something that really, really needs to be continued to be unwrapped and really see where this even came from, right? So, um, yeah, I have a friend who is deeply, this is her life mission, is to bring forth in regards to circumcision, Jenna McClellan, and you can find her on Instagram, but she's going to be a force to be reckoned with in regards to this. So yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely link an episode that she did on the Here for the Truth podcast.
Yeah, that was great.
Mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to kind of wrap up the conversation. You know, you're moving into an upcoming class that you're teaching all about birth imprints. And there's so much healing that can be done for like lay people who are just wanting to be like, I just want to heal this shit. Maybe I want to have kids at some point in the future, or maybe I had a traumatic birth. I'm trying to figure it out, all that stuff. But then also, there are many practitioners as well who want to step into the birth space, step into the birth field, and they haven't addressed their own birth imprints. And so, anything that you want to share about the class for how that can support people in both camps and what you're going to be offering and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think it's for everybody, everyone that's been born. And so, yes, if you're a parent and this resonates or brings up something within you that you feel called to explore and be curious with, again, it could be about your own birth, it could be about your children's births. This is completely a class course for you. If you are a birth worker, I feel like this is so important because, again, this is where, if you're unaware of your imprints, when you are in a birth space, that's when it's going to come up. And again, they're unconscious. So you're not even going to know that these are coming up in those spaces. Okay. And so in my course, we really get familiar. We really get to understand what that is for each person. And again, I feel like it's part of our way to being more true in our service, right? Because we're not going to be projecting our own stuff into the space, right? And we can be truly present with the women and the families that we serve. So yeah, and it's called creating a field of safety for that reason. So the safety needs to be within ourself first and foremost, okay? And then that can trickle out into our families and into the community. It's a 6-week live or 6-class live course. It's online. It's every Tuesdays. And I also added this time around 2 mentorship calls because I found that the last time I taught this, it was just, I felt like there needed to be a space for integration, a space for people to bring up what was, coming up for them, and just even like people needing to be reflected on and witnessed, because again, that is where the fracture happened, right? Was not being witnessed by another. So the fracture happened in relation, and this is how we can heal, is again in relation. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I can attest, Luka is an amazing, amazing teacher. It's such a blessing and an honor to be able to learn from her. So if you're able to attend this class, definitely go for it. When is it starting again? September 23rd?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so coming up.
Cool. So we will have the link in the show notes. How else can people connect with you, Luka?
So I'm on Instagram as Deeply Rooted Healing Traditions, and then also on my website, which is deeplyrootedhealing.com.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you so much. This has been a really beautiful conversation, really just offering my deepest respect and reverence for all of the work that you're doing for the families, for the babies, for the mothers, for the fathers, and just many blessings on the path moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.